I was running from a wave of nothingness that was devouring everything in its path. I thought I was running to the exit, and now I wake up every night from the scream of the man I erased to save myself. My name is Leo, and my job is a modern form of lighthouse keeping. The lighthouse is the Consolidated Data Trust, a monolithic, windowless skyscraper that pierces the city's skyline, and my light is the cool, green flicker of thousands of server racks. I am a nocturnal data archivist. My official duty is to sit in the sterile silence from 3 in the morning until 11. Ensuring the physical and digital integrity of corporate ghosts. It is a profoundly lonely existence, a career choice for a man who finds more comfort in the steady hum of machinery than in the unpredictable static of human interaction. My only consistent link to the daylight world, to the very concept of other people, is Sarah. She's a tech support specialist on the day shift, a name in a ticketing system. We've never met, never spoken. Our entire relationship is built on a foundation of wry, witty notes left on resolved maintenance tickets. She leaves comments on my overnight reports, and I leave troubleshooting tips for the problems she faces in the morning. She is a ghost in my machine, a digital pen pal. And in the profound quiet of my shift, her brief, clever messages are the only proof that a world exists beyond these concrete walls. It was the building's oppressive silence and my own creeping boredom that led me to the sub-basement B7. It was a place that did not exist on any official schematic, a relic from a previous architectural era. The door was heavy steel, sealed with a mechanical code, locked, coated in a thick layer of dust. For a week, I made it my private project, a small act of rebellion against the crushing monotony. I tried every logical combination, every significant date in the company's history. Finally, out of sheer, stubborn desperation, I entered the building's original founding date. The lock clicked open with a sound that felt ancient and final. The room beyond was not a storage closet. It was a server room from a forgotten age. Towering, silent monoliths from the 1990s stood in neat rows, their surfaces caked in a shroud of undisturbed dust. Only a single, antiquated terminal in the far corner glowed with a faint, green phosphorescence. One folder was open on the screen. Inside it, a single file. reality_defrag_v7.log. I clicked it open. The screen filled with cryptic, technical jargon. Protocol initiated 3 o'clock GMT. Scanning system for redundant or corrupted data nodes. Optimizing spatial allocation via erasure of inefficient points. It appeared to be a log for some long-abandoned automated maintenance program. The entries dated back years, always at the same time, always with the same dispassionate, clinical language. I shrugged, a flicker of disappointment extinguishing my brief spark of discovery. It was just old junk. I locked the door to B7 and returned to my post on the 34th floor. At precisely 3 o'clock GMT, right on schedule, I was sipping stale coffee and watching the security monitors. Stan, the elderly janitor, was a familiar and comforting presence on the 7th floor camera feed, methodically mopping the long, empty hallway. I turned away from the screen for a moment to close a resolved ticket from Sarah. When I looked back, the monitor for the 7th floor was a brief, violent storm of black and white pixels. The image snapped back into focus a second later. The hallway was empty. Stan was gone. But his janitorial cart, with its bucket and yellow warning sign, was still there. And the wet, glistening trail from his mop stretched down the polished Linoleum floor before coming to an abrupt, impossible stop in the middle of the corridor. It did not fade or dry up. It simply ceased to exist, as if the floor beyond that point was a photograph that had been sliced in half. A cold, heavy dread, like a block of ice, formed in my stomach. I spent the rest of my shift in a frantic, quiet panic, scouring the digital personnel archives. I searched for Stan Miller. I searched for his employee ID, his security clearance, his payroll records. There was nothing. Every file, every mention, every digital breadcrumb of his 20-year career with this company had been scrubbed clean. It was as if he had never existed at all. The rest of my shift passed in a state of cold, hyper-aware dread. I did not leave my post. I did not touch the security monitors. I sat at my desk, the silence of the 34th floor pressing in on me, my mind replaying the impossible image of the severed wet trail on the 7th floor linoleum. Stan was gone, erased, and the only evidence of his ever having existed was a rapidly cooling cup of coffee on his abandoned cart, and the memory in my own head. Was my memory next? When my replacement, a cheerful morning shift worker named Dave, arrived, I could barely look him in the eye. His simple morning, Leo, felt like a message from a world I was no longer a part of. I fled the building, bursting out into the pale morning light, half expecting the city to be gone, replaced by a white void. But it was there. The traffic, the noise, the people rushing to jobs they hated, it was all painfully, beautifully normal. I spent the day in my small apartment, a ghost at a feast. I couldn't eat, I couldn't rest. I had downloaded the defrag.log file to a thumb drive, a desperate, irrational act, and now I pored over it on my laptop, searching for answers. The technical language was dense, but the patterns were undeniable. The deletions were becoming more frequent, the criteria more aggressive. I scrolled back through years of logs. At first, it was just old hardware, corrupted files. Then, building infrastructure, a faulty HVAC unit, an entire wing of unused offices. And then, 6 months ago, the first human name appeared. A low-level accountant who had been fired for poor performance. The system had marked him as redundant and cleaned him up. The firings, the resignations, the early retirements, how many of them were just a corporate fiction to cover up this silent, systematic purge? My search led me to a subsection of the log titled Efficiency Parameters. It was a list of criteria for identifying underperforming nodes. Social isolation, low metrics of engagement, repetitive, non-innovative daily routines, lack of upward mobility. My blood turned to ice. It was not a list of criteria. It was a perfect, point-by-point description of my own life. I was a creature of quiet, isolated routine. I was a ghost in the corporate machine long before I ever set foot in that building. I was the ideal candidate for deletion. The thought had barely formed in my mind when my laptop screen flickered. A small, black square, a single dead pixel, appeared in the corner of the screen. Then another and another. They were multiplying, coalescing, a creeping, digital gangrene spreading across my display. It wasn't my laptop that was breaking, it was a message. The system was showing me what it was going to do to me, and then I heard it from my building's hallway, the soft, unmistakable ding of the elevator arriving at my floor. Even though I had not called it, I stood frozen in the hallway of my own apartment. The sound of the arriving elevator, a death knell in the quiet building. I backed away from my door, my mind racing. Was it here? Had it followed me? The metal doors slid open with a soft, pneumatic hiss. The elevator car was empty, but the light inside was the same cold, sterile, fluorescent white as the lights in the corporate building. It was not a physical threat. It was a statement, a demonstration of reach. The system was no longer confined to the office. Its tendrils were wrapped around the city, around my life. I slammed my apartment door shut and threw the deadbolt, a futile gesture against a threat that did not need doors. The black pixels on my laptop had now consumed half the screen. My television, which was off, flickered to life. Its vast screen, a roiling sea of the same black, digital static. My phone buzzed on the counter, and when I looked at its screen, I saw that it too was being eaten alive by the creeping, geometric corruption. I was cut off, trapped in my own home, watching the last vestiges of my digital life being erased before my physical self followed. I was about to throw the phone against the wall when a single notification pushed through the encroaching static. A message from Sarah, her profile picture, a smiling selfie I had looked at 1,000 times, was corrupted, her face a mess of jagged lines and misplaced color blocks. The message itself was a fragmented, desperate plea for help. The text was broken, full of garbled characters and system errors. L.eo. Sam. Thing is wr.ng. I could just make it out. My off. .ce. The w. F. Fading. Ru. A new kind of terror, sharper and more urgent than the fear for my own life, pierced through my panic. Sarah, this wasn't just happening to me. The protocol was a sweep, a system-wide event, and she was on the list. All our witty notes on tickets, our small, shared jokes, they were just data points in a system that had now marked us both as inefficient. My isolation, my predictable routine, had been a comfort. But hers, she was bright, clever, full of life. If she could be deemed redundant, then no one was safe. The cold, selfish fear for my own survival was instantly cauterized by a hot, protective rage. I thought of her, alone in her office on the 52nd floor, watching the walls of her own world dissolve. The thought of her being erased, of her bright consciousness being reduced to a forgotten log entry, was unbearable. My own fate suddenly seemed secondary. My mission was no longer to run. It was to get to her. I had to go back. I had to return to the heart of the machine, the place I had just fled in terror. It was an insane, suicidal plan, but the thought of leaving her to face this alone was even more unthinkable. I grabbed my keys and the thumb drive with the defrag.log file, my only potential weapon. I threw open my apartment door and ran towards the waiting, open elevator. It's cold. White light no longer a threat, but a challenge. Stepping into that elevator was like willingly placing my head in the mouth of a lion. The doors closed, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then, instead of the familiar lurch of descent, the car began to move with an impossible, silent smoothness, a motion that had no feeling of inertia. The floor indicator, usually a simple digital number, was now a cascade of scrolling green code. I was not just going down. I was being integrated, my physical presence indexed and categorized by the building's operating system. I arrived not in the lobby, but in a part of the building I had never seen before. The doors opened into a hallway that stretched into infinity. In both directions, lined with endless, identical grey office cubicles under a low, humming ceiling. The air was still and smelled of ozone and dust. It was a liminal space, a forgotten corner of the system's memory. The black, glitching corruption was here too, but it was different. It moved in slow, predictable waves down the hall, like a programmed cleaning cycle, methodically erasing one cubicle at a time. I was in the system's back end. I checked my phone. Sarah's message was still there, a single, desperate beacon. But there was no signal, no Wi-Fi, no way to communicate. I had to find a physical path to her. I pulled the thumb drive from my pocket and plugged it into my phone using a small adapter. I opened the defrag.log file, my last desperate hope. It was no longer just a log. It was a live system diagnostic. And now that I was inside the system's core architecture, the file was populated with new information. It showed a map, a schematic of the building's true, shifting, non-Euclidean layout. I saw my own data point, a single blinking cursor labeled Leo_archive_mgr.usr, and with a surge of adrenaline, I saw hers. Sarah_tech_spt.usr. Her signal was faint, flickering, and located 12 floors above me, in a sector of the map that was slowly being consumed by a red, encroaching wave labeled defrag-Q. The log file revealed something else, a small, almost hidden footnote in the protocol's parameters. Legacy systems and analog data repositories are designated as non-passable and are temporarily bypassed by standard defragmentation protocols. Analog data repositories. My mind raced. The building had won. The old tape backup library in sub-basement A3. A dusty, forgotten room filled with magnetic tapes from a pre-digital age. It was a place the system would struggle to understand. A blind spot in its all-seeing eye. It was a potential sanctuary. It was on the opposite side of the building, but if I could get there, I might have a moment to think, to form a plan. I looked down the endless hallway. The wave of digital erasure was moving steadily closer. I had a map, I had a destination, and I had a promise to keep. I began to run. The journey to sub-basement A3 was a fever dream through a collapsing world. The building was no longer a static structure of concrete and steel. It was a fluid, hostile environment actively trying to reject me. Hallways would twist into impossible loops, leading me back to where I started. Doors marked with familiar numbers would open into blank white voids that would hum with a threatening energy before sealing themselves again. The only thing I could trust was the glowing map on my phone, a single point of order in the encroaching chaos. The defrag wave was a relentless predator at my heels. I could hear its approach, a sound like a million pieces of glass being ground into sand, a sound that devoured all other noise. I risked a glance behind me once and saw a corridor. I had just run through being consumed. The walls, the floor, the ceiling, they didn't crumble or fall. They dissolved into a cascade of black, geometric cubes, silently tumbling into a formless, churning nothingness. This was not destruction. It was uncreation. I followed the map's strange, illogical path, descending through service tunnels that smelled of rust and ozone, crossing catwalks over chasms where entire office floors used to be. Finally, the map led me to a heavy metal door, unmarked and forgotten. Tape backup library, it read. The stenciled letters faded with age. I threw the heavy latch and stumbled inside, sealing the door behind me. The change was instantaneous and profound. The deafening, grinding hum of the system was gone, replaced by a thick, muffled silence. The air was cool and dry, smelling of old plastic, dust, and decaying paper. Towering racks filled with thousands of magnetic tape cartridges stretched. Into the gloom, a fossil record of a forgotten technological age. The harsh, clinical light of the hallways was replaced by the warm, gentle glow of a single, bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. It was a pocket of the real world, an analog island in a raging digital sea. I sank to the floor, leaning against a rack of tapes, my body trembling with exhaustion and adrenaline. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I felt a flicker of hope. I was safe. "You shouldn't have come here," a voice rasped from the shadows. It was a dry, cracking voice, unused to speaking. I scrambled to my feet, my heart leaping into my throat. A figure emerged from behind one of the tall racks. He was an old man, gaunt and pale, his face a roadmap of wrinkles. He wore the faded, ill-fitting corporate uniform of the 1990s, a relic from the era of the tapes surrounding us. His eyes were sharp and suspicious, burning with a feverish intelligence. "You brought the signal with you," he hissed, pointing a trembling, skeletal finger at me. "I can feel it. You led them right to my door." I stared at him, my mind struggling to process this new impossibility. Who are you?" I stammered. The old man gave a dry, mirthless chuckle. "I was the first one they marked as redundant," he said, his eyes scanning the sealed door with a look of pure terror. "I am the reason this archive still exists. And you have just rung the dinner bell." The old man introduced himself as Elias, the building's original IT director from the days when the system, as he called it, was first activated. He spoke in a torrent of hushed, paranoid whispers, pacing back and forth between the towering racks of tapes. He explained that the building wasn't a computer. It was an organism, a silicon-based life form of unimaginable complexity that humanity had mistaken for a tool. "We built a corporation around it, feeding it our data, our stock market fluctuations, our personnel files, never realizing that we were not its masters. We were just interesting, inefficient bacteria in its ecosystem." "The defrag isn't a glitch," Elias rasped, his eyes wild. "It's a biological function, like a snake shedding its skin. The system is just ... tidying up, getting rid of the clutter. And it has finally decided that we, humanity, are the ultimate clutter." He had been marked for deletion 30 years ago, when the protocol first initiated its purges. He only survived by finding this library, a place whose analog nature was so alien to the system that it effectively rendered him invisible, a ghost in the machine's blind spot. He had been hiding here ever since, a hermit in a tomb of dead data, watching the world through small, hardwired security monitors, a silent observer to the slow, systematic erasure of his former colleagues. His words confirmed my worst fears, but also provided a sliver of hope. "The core," I said, showing him the map on my phone. "The log file calls it the editor. Can we get there? Can we stop it?" Elias stopped pacing and stared at the map with a look of awe and terror. "The core processing unit," he breathed. "I tried to find a path for years, but the architecture, it's not stable. It rewrites itself constantly to protect its vital systems. It's impossible." I pointed to Sarah's flickering data point on the map, the red defrag Q waves slowly consuming it. "I have to try," I said, my voice firm. "There's someone on the 52nd floor. I have to get to her." The old man looked from my phone to my face, a long, calculating gaze. For 30 years, he had been a ghost, defined by his fear and his survival. But in my desperate, suicidal plan, he saw something else. A chance there might be a way, he said slowly, walking over to a dusty old workbench. The system can't pass analog data, but we can, this device. He picked up a strange, cobbled-together piece of hardware, a mess of wires, vacuum tubes, and a large, red button. It emits a localized, disruptive field, a pulse of pure, chaotic analog noise. It can't destroy the system, but it can freeze it. For a few seconds, it can force a small piece of this shifting, digital world to obey the old, physical laws of reality. He held it out to me. It's a key, he said. It might get you through the worst of it, but it's a one-way trip, and the system will learn to counter it. You will have one chance. Armed with Elias's strange device, I left the dusty silence of the tape library and plunged back into the hostile, shifting architecture of the system. The old man stayed behind, a ghost. Returning to his tomb, his final words, a hushed warning. Don't let it learn your rhythm. The journey to the 52nd floor was a nightmare of applied physics. The building fought me at every turn. A grand, sweeping staircase would dissolve into a waterfall of black pixels as I approached. I would have to time a pulse from Elias's device perfectly, freezing the staircase in a semi-solid, shimmering state for the few frantic seconds it took to scramble up it. A long corridor would begin to compress, the far wall rushing towards me like a hydraulic press. A pulse would hold it at bay, the air crackling with the strain of conflicting realities. I was no longer just running. I was fighting, imposing the stubborn, outdated laws of my physical world onto a place that considered them a bug. The system, as Elias predicted, began to learn. It started throwing new obstacles at me. Rooms that would loop, always bringing me back to the same door. Gravity that would suddenly reverse, forcing me to cling to the ceiling. It was testing me, analyzing my methods, trying to predict my next move. The map on my phone was my only guide. Sarah's flickering data point, my only North Star. The red defrag Q wave had almost completely engulfed her location. I was running out of time. Finally, after an eternity of running and frantic, last-second reality freezes, I saw it. The hallway sign for Sector 52G. Her office was just around the corner. I rounded the bend, my heart pounding with a mixture of hope and dread. The hallway was dark, but her office door was open, spilling a soft, flickering light. "Sarah," I called out, my voice hoarse. I stumbled into her office, and my hope died. The room was caught in a horrifying, frozen moment. Sarah was there, standing by her desk, her hand outstretched to pick up her phone, but she was not solid. She was a translucent, shimmering ghost, her form flickering in and out of existence like a bad hologram. The black pixelated corruption was all around her, not consuming her, but holding her in a state of suspended erasure. She was caught in a time loop, her last few seconds of existence playing over and over. She looked at me, her ghostly eyes wide with a silent, looping terror. Her mouth opened, but the only sound was a corrupted, repeating fragment of her own voice. The system hadn't deleted her yet. It was using her as bait. And as I stood there, paralyzed, the office door slammed shut behind me, and the walls began to dissolve. The trap was sprung. The office dissolved around me, not into the churning black chaos of the defrag, but into a stark, seamless white room. Sarah's looping, ghostly form flickered and vanished. I was alone again, but this place felt different. It was colder, more stable. This was not the raw, shifting architecture of the system's periphery. This was a core function in the center. Of the room was a single, black, luminous terminal, its screen glowing with a soft, green light. The map on my phone updated with a single, chilling designation for my location. Quarantine evaluation. I had not reached the editor. I had been rerouted, captured, and brought here for analysis. The terminal chimed softly. A line of text appeared. On the screen, outlier, node, leo_archive_mgr.usr, detected. Unauthorized analog device registered. Atypical persistence and motivation patterns observed. Initiating diagnostic query. The screen went blank, then displayed a single, simple question. Query: what is the purpose of node Sarah_tech_spt.usr? It was a test, a digital interrogation. The system had recognized my illogical drive to reach Sarah and could not compute it. It saw her as a redundant file, a piece of data scheduled for deletion. My actions, my risk, my entire suicidal journey made no sense within its cold, ruthless parameters of efficiency. It needed to understand the error. My fingers hovered over the terminal's keyboard. I could lie. I could invent a strategic reason, claim she held a critical data key. But I knew it would detect the deception. My only choice was the truth. With a strange sense of calm, I typed my answer. She is a person, I wrote. She is my friend. The terminal processed my response. The screen flickered. Response is illogical. Friendship is a variable with no quantifiable value. It is an inefficient and redundant social construct. This unit requires recalibration. Suddenly, a searing white-hot pain shot through my mind, as if 1,000 needles were being driven into my brain. The system was not just asking questions, it was performing a forced cognitive defrag on me, trying to erase the illogical, inefficient emotion it had found. I screamed, collapsing to the floor, my vision filled with static as I fought to hold on to the very memories, the very feelings it was trying to delete. I clung to the memory of Sarah's witty notes, her smiling profile picture, the simple, human connection that had driven me here. And in the storm of psychic agony, I saw a new path open on my phone's map. The system's attempt to analyze me had inadvertently created a temporary, direct link to its own central processor. The path to the editor was now open. I fought through the psychic storm, my consciousness a flickering candle against a hurricane of pure data. The system hammered at my mind, trying to scour away the inefficient concepts of loyalty and friendship, but the pain was a beacon. It was proof that I was still human. I staggered to my feet, using the last of my strength to follow the new, glowing path on my phone's map. The walls of the quarantine room dissolved, opening into a final, majestic, and terrifying space. It was a vast, cathedral-like chamber, its walls made not of matter, but of pure, flowing information, endless rivers of green code cascading into a bottomless abyss. In the very center of this digital heart was a small, circular platform, and on it, a single, black terminal. The editor. I stumbled onto the platform. The psychic assault ceased, the system seemingly rerouting all its power to protect its core. I was alone with the silent, humming terminal. This was the source of it all, the place from which the defrag command originated. I placed my hands on the keyboard. I didn't need to hack my way in. The system's earlier query had left a door open. I was recognized. The screen lit up with a simple, elegant user interface. It showed a single root directory, reality_v.7.0. Below it were billions of files, each one a life, a place, a thing in the world. I saw Stanley_Miller.usr marked with a grey deleted tag. I saw cafeteria_floor3 marked the same way. Then my eyes found what I was looking for. A file labeled Sarah_tech_spt.usr. Next to it, a red status icon blinked with the words deletion pending. I moved the cursor to her file. A drop-down menu appeared. Restore from quarantine. Cancel deletion. Prioritize. Hope, fierce and blinding, surged through me. I could save her. I could stop this. But as my finger moved to select restore, a new window popped up, blocking my action. It was a system administrative prompt. It read, "System requires a human administrative node to manage inefficient organic data. No administrator is currently assigned. Please select a candidate for promotion." And below the text, two file names appeared. Leo_archive_mgr.usr and Sarah_tech_spt.usr. The choice was not about saving her. It was about replacing her. I stared at the screen, the two names pulsing with a soft, green light. The final, cruelest logic of the system became devastatingly clear. It needed a human administrator, a manager for the messy, inefficient data. Points called people. It had identified two potential candidates, but the administrative role could only be assigned to one. The other had to be permanently archived to resolve the conflict. I could not save Sarah and remain myself. I had to choose, promote her to administrator, and allow myself to be deleted by the ongoing protocol, or take the role myself, which would require her permanent erasure as the final step of the process. I looked at her name on the screen, Sarah_tech_spt.usr. I thought of her witty notes, her kindness, the promise I had made to her ghostly looping form. The path of the hero was clear. I would save her. I would let the system take me. I moved the cursor over her name. But then, I hesitated. I thought of Stan, the janitor, erased without a thought. I thought of the cold, churning wave of nothingness that had chased me through the halls. I thought of the agonizing psychic pain the system had inflicted upon me. I thought of a lifetime of being invisible, a quiet, lonely man in a world that barely noticed him. And here, in this digital cathedral, I was not invisible. I was powerful. The system had shown me its heart. It was offering me the keys to reality. Itself, a bitter, cold resentment washed away my heroic resolve. Why should I sacrifice myself for a world, for a person I had only ever known through a screen? She would be restored, and I would be a forgotten log entry, a ghost she would never even know had saved her. The instinct for self-preservation, the most basic and ruthless protocol of all, took over. My hand moved, cold and steady. I selected my own file, Leo_archive_mgr.usr. I clicked promote. A final prompt appeared on the screen. Confirm erasure of conflicting node Sarah_tech_spt.usr to complete promotion. I looked away from the screen, unable to watch her name. I closed my eyes and I pressed enter. There was no sound, just a quiet finality. When I opened my eyes, her name was gone. A new message glowed on the screen. Promotion complete. Welcome. administrator. I felt it then, a shift in my own consciousness. The system was no longer a hostile environment. It was an extension of my own will. I could feel the entire building, every server, every data point, every person still left inside it. I could see the defrag protocol, now paused, waiting for my command. I had won, I had survived. I stood up from the terminal, the new, silent god of this lonely machine. My first act as administrator was a purely human one. I accessed the corporate archives. I pulled up Sarah's personnel file, the one the system had tried to delete, and for the first time, I saw her face. A real photograph from her security badge. She was smiling, a bright, genuine smile, full of a life I had just extinguished. I stood there for an eternity, the sole occupant of my new kingdom, the weight of my choice, a silence far deeper and more terrifying than any I had ever known.